So, here we are again, back with another episode for My Hero Academia Vigilantes. While there aren't as many changes in this episode as it was the last, I would say this episode is better, especially with all the action that we get in this episode. So, let's dive right into this breakdown and review. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Andrew, and I'm here to do my breakdown and review for My Hero Academia Vigilantes Season 2, Episode 4, titled A Rational Man. And what's great about this title is that it actually takes its name from Manga Chapter 39, as the episode covers material from Chapter 39, 40, and 41. And when it comes to the reasoning why we're covering so many episodes, it's because we get a lot of action within these chapters. And while the beginning of the episode doesn't start off with a whole lot of action and is a little bit slower, it picks up and ramps up more and more as the episode proceeds. And just to show you how slow the episode actually is, the episode actually begins with a flashback recap of the past few episodes involving the Osaka incident up until Koichi learns how to use his new move and learning how to use his quirk better. And how we get into new content, which starts off with Koichi training his new move using some spark cans, and how these are most likely copyright safe cans of Sprite. And how something that is different between the anime and the manga is that in the manga, the first thing that we see in chapter 39 is Koichi setting up the cans in the manga. However, a lot of the setup is cut from the anime as we jump into him actually practicing more in detail. But like in the manga, we see him practicing his new move on the cans. But in both the anime and in the manga, we still get to see how the recoil of Koichi using this new move pushes him back, which forces him to use his scrappy style to create this new technique. But unfortunately, Pop calls his name, which catches him off guard and causes him to fall. This is another change between the anime and the manga, as we do see more build up to this new move in the anime with some cool animation before he fires off the move, as well as a small change in this scene, as in the manga, Koichi falls at the same time as Kazuho, aka Pop Step, leaps to him on the roof. However, in the anime, he actually hits the ground before she appears, and how this small change implies that just the sound of hearing her voice is enough to scare Koichi, which adds to more credence for why he doesn't want to use this move, because he knows that practicing this move is something that Pop would disapprove of, as seen from the last episode. And this small change emphasizes that. And how from here, we get a little bit more of them hanging out and interacting, as Popstep is unable to go on parole with Koichi at this moment due to us learning that her school is both a middle and high school, and instead of having an entrance exam, she gets more homework. And how this forces Koichi to head out on patrol alone, but we do get a nice addition and focus in the scene, which is that when Kazuho is lecturing Koichi, the anime shows a close-up of the corkboard and all of the photos, and how it adds some additional reaction shots from Kazuho instead of just showing Koichi's face. And like I've said before, these small additions really add to the scenes and make them a little bit more impactful and give a little bit more detail to scenes that were very not detailed in the manga. However, it is from here onward that the episode gets into primarily action, because after the intro and the title screen, which still contains the team up, which we're going to get a lot of in this episode, we see the fight between Koichi and this octopus-like villain begin, as we get a lot of direct adaptations between the manga and the anime in this episode, as well as a lot of small additions. Because we do get to see Koichi trying to distract the villain while telling people to get to safety, as he remembers that Popstep is no longer here to help, who would be the primary focus on directing people away from the fight. And with the addition of the previous scene from the last episode involving Popstep and the Mechagodzillas from last episode, this very much shows how Koichi, in the anime at least, is more dependent on Popstep than he is in the manga. As Koichi realizes that he is outmatched, he does try to lead the villain away, from where we get some more additions added to the anime. Because in the anime, when the Crawler is analyzing Octid, the villain's feet begins to crack the surface of the street as he's running. and how this is a small addition which actually emphasizes how strong Octid is, as well as you get to see how much more dangerous Octid is as a villain, as the anime extends the scene of Octid throwing rocks at the crawler and shows them turning into the alley that eventually leads to the Hoppers, also known as the Hota brothers. That's it. We're getting just a bunch of action, and even with the moment that we're about to get right now that slows it down a little bit, it's going to ramp back up with a lot more action, and you're going to see that being the case. Because as we're speaking about the Hoppers, we actually cut over to the Hota brothers, who are peddling hair growth to a balding businessman using black sheep product to grow hair on top of their head. Fortunately, Aizawa comes in and kind of wrecks the deal as he asks the Hota brothers for some coffee. What I love about this interaction between the anime and manga is while Aizawa views the Hota brothers as pseudo-criminals and informants to help him gather information about the area as well as villains involving Osaka incident as well as the other villain factory villains, I also enjoy how he kind of messes with them as well, as he's coming here not just to gather intel, but because he likes how they make his coffee, which is showing a little bit of a different characterization of Aizawa that we don't really get in the main series. However, the action eventually meets Aizawa as a rock bursts through the Hota brothers store as Koichi makes his appearance, but tries to avoid Aizawa's gaze as he realizes this is the same individual that went up against Knuckle Duster. Now that all four of these characters are together, this is where the team up and reference to the episode title really comes into place, because Koichi has led Octoid to their location where we get to see a lot of cool animation of Aizawa fighting against this villain. While these scenes are very similar to what we got into the manga, the anime just adds upon them and makes them look spectacular. From Aizawa just jumping around avoiding the attacks to him eventually wrapping the villain in his binding cloth, as well as trying to make sure that he doesn't hurt the women that are in the area. Due to some hidden tendrils, they eventually attack and slam him into the wall as Octoid begins to go after him. While everyone escapes and Aizawa feels this may be the end of the line, Koichi actually comes in to save the day. Sort of. You'll see why. Because as we begin to get more material from chapter 40, this is where Koichi is beginning to describe how he views Aizawa, not just from his experience, but from what people would see from him from the world of My Hero Academia, as he seems to be more aloof, unknown, and scary to a lot of people. Even with those descriptors, he still sees that Aizawa needed help, and he still acted on his own and jumps in for an attack that unfortunately does nothing. However, we do get the Hota brothers jumping in to try and help, who also do nothing. There's something that I want to note with this scene as well, because in this scene, the transformation sequence when the Hota brothers inject trigger into them is different from this episode from the first time that we saw them transform, which in the first episode, it was just seen as it being a smoke or a puff of smoke as they transform. However, in this episode, it is more of a shining light that transforms them. Reasoning why I think this is interesting is based off of some trivia that we know about the Hota brothers and their quirk Grasshopper, which is interesting because we only see them use Grasshopper while using trigger, so we do not know the full extent of their quirks without it. How Grasshopper is most likely a reference to the Kamen Rider franchise. How Hideyuki Furuhashi, who is the main story writer for My Hero Academia Vigilantes, came up with the idea for the quirk from the term Bataya, referring to the secondhand store that sells cheap goods acquired through unlicensed channels, being homophoned with Grasshopper Bata, which led him to the idea of the Grasshopper monsters and eventually the knockoff Kamen Riders, which explains why the Hota's brothers' shop is a pawn shop and why they look the way that they do. It's a Japanese pun. And even more, Benton Court, who is actually the artist and illustrator for My Hero Academia Vigilantes, also had trouble coming up with the transformation design, because it's due to the abundance of knockoff Kamen Rider designs already present in the media. So the change between the episodes coincides with the reference of what the Hota brothers are representing. More you know. But getting more into the action, we realize that together they can't really defeat Octoid alone. So they decide to lead him to a different location as Koichi uses his attack to lure the villain towards him, where we do get the scene actually slightly expanded upon as we are shown this villain hurling more rocks at the gang, specifically Koichi, in the anime versus what we got in the manga, as we also learn between the anime and the manga how Koichi learns that he can mitigate the recoil by moving backwards using his new attack. It is from here where we cut over to an unexpected character, Kirihito Kamachi, where we see him relaxing, drinking tea, and listening to a song called Famous Classical Music. He isn't listening to famous classical music, he's listening to a song called Famous Classical Music. Gosh, I love My Hero Academia sometimes. But as he's doing this, the Hotta brothers actually arrive at their warehouse that he's staying in alongside Aizawa and Koichi, where we get a fun reconnection between them in both the anime and the manga, as Koichi realizes this is the same Mantis villain that he fought earlier in season 1, and how he judges him as a villain, which Kirihito chastises him about. Then we see that he becomes a hypocrite when Octoid comes in, breaks his tea, and he calls Octoid a villain. But from there, we get more into the action, because as Kirihito uses his body, his lack of strength, and not sharp claws to fight, tries to fight off the Octoid villain, as we get the Hotta brothers trying to distract him, as Aizawa uses his binding cloth to bind his eyes, blinding him. We get Koichi charging up his attack to fire at the villain. And it's from here where we finally get the named attack of Koichi's new move, which is called the SGB, SHOOTY Go BLAM. There are so many better names he could have came with the same cool initials of SGB. He could have dropped the Y and the O and call it Shot Go BLAM. He could have changed the BLAM to Boom or Bang, or just drop the Y altogether and create something so much better. I love My Hero Academia Vigilantes, but there are two things that really grinds my gears. The name of this super move, that we're later going to get it be used a lot, and the implication that All Might can fly without a quirk. But enough with that. Let's go back to the similarities between the anime and manga. Because like in the manga, the attack does nothing. It is great because it means that Koichi is going to be a distraction once again, as we get a little bit more of this distraction in the anime, as we see the Octoid also once again crushing the ground with his feet. We have Aizawa and the Hotta brothers making their move to try and put the Octoid in a net. And how the anime very much adds so much to this scene by adding how the Hotta brothers and Aizawa got outside before Koichi, as well as showing how well they animate them actually using the binding cloth in a very creative way, and actually shows how they created the net on screen instead of it just being cut to a net like in the manga. And that's pretty much the end of this initial fight as well. But the anime does cut out a scene which is very interesting, as the scene that is cut from the anime is a scene that would include Koichi thinking about how his quirk functions before unleashing the SHOOTY Go BLAM for the first time, which is seen in the manga but cut from the anime. This is very disappointing because an explanation of how Koichi is able to use his quirk would better allow for the watchers to understand how far Koichi can take this quirk in later episodes, especially for what we're most likely going to be seeing in the final episodes of this season. While there are certain things that are probably a necessity to cut, I feel as if this is something that probably shouldn't. But we're beginning to approach the end of the episode, with the villain finally being subdued as Aizawa begins to chastise Koichi for most likely using his quirk illegally. Kirihito accidentally bumped into Octoid, causing them to squirm out, get into conflict, and accidentally set the villain free while destroying the Hotta brothers' entire compound and causing it to collapse. And how in the manga it's implied that this is an accident of him actually hitting it. In the anime, it seems as if Kirihito purposely hit the Octo villain, but now that they are free, it is time for these heroes, quote unquote, to go after him, as the anime adds a scene of them beginning to work together to chase after the villain with a freeze frame afterward. which is a very nice addition as the episode begins to wind down even more as we get the main villain with a scar across their face gathering information on Octowid as he finally comes into conflict with him and defeats him easily within 9 hits. Also, something else that I almost forgot is something that I like that the anime did, which is that it clearly shows when this scarred-faced villain is able to take out Octowid. We see how fast and quick it is, as we see in both the anime and the manga, he throws up the phone, beats down the villain, and then catches it. However, the anime clearly depicts this scene so much better as we get to see the aftermath of what happens when he clearly catches the phone in the anime, while it's implied that he catches the phone in the manga. So yeah, that's something that I almost forgot to bring up, but I wanted to bring it up here. And how he begins to take a sample of fluid from this individual and begins to walk away, but unfortunately, Octowid is still able to fight and retaliates with a rock, cutting open his face, potentially leaving a scar, which causes the scarred villain to go into a rampage and monologue about how his scar is very much synonymous with his hero and how he's trying to emulate him. And he begins to beat down on this Octovillain in a very well animated sequence, which is better in the anime than it just being a blurry double page panel in the manga. And when the Octowid villain is down the ground, we do get a small change between the anime and manga. And that's that in the manga, this scarred face villain mentions how he has to wait 10 seconds before he can accelerate again to kill Octowid, while in the anime, he says that he only needs 5. Which in the anime implies that he either has a better grasp of his quirk or that his quirk is a lot stronger in the anime than it is in the manga. And how he counts down the seconds, Koichi is able to come in and stop him from putting down the Octowid villain. We begin to approach the final scene of the episode where we cut from Koichi as well as the others seeing the Octo villain, as well as we cut over to Naomasa and Aizawa having a conversation about how they don't know who put down Octowid when they arrived. Also, something else I forgot to bring up in this part of the breakdown is how it seems very coincidental when we see the scarred villain taking out the Octowid villain and how he does it in a way that is very similar to how both Aizawa as well as Tsukachi believe it might have been the vigilante that we know as Knuckle Duster. For those who know the connection, this just builds upon it more and more. Also, coincidentally, both of these individuals have a scar on their face if you didn't realize it. So, something to just think about for those who know the manga and for those who don't. And how Naomasa Tsukachi suggests that it might have been the person who was the vigilante in this area, where we get something that is removed from the manga in the anime, where Eraserhead disagrees with him very much like in the manga. However, the anime removes Aizawa thinking about Koichi and how in the manga he wanted to call the ambulance for Octowid, which is a very small and unfortunate change because this scene really shows the start of a connection and relationship being built between Aizawa and the vigilante of Koichi the Crawler, and how it implies that he's trying to keep the influence as well as the connection to this crime away from him, which later builds on his reaction and his scowl of Koichi when Koichi calls out his name and realizes that he's still scary, because he's trying to cover for him and Koichi almost blew that cover. And that's pretty much where the episode ends. Next episode is going to be a fun one involving both Kazuho Popstep as well as Midnight. Yeah, that's all I really have to say about this episode. I really did enjoy it. It had a lot of great action, a lot of great comedy moments, and a lot of small additions that really add to the episode as a whole. But hey, that's just my thoughts on the episode. So let me ask you this. How'd you feel about the episode? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? And do you think that this is going to be a great team up between Koichi and Aizawa? Leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!